As we collectively witness the current information war via lamestream media, entertainment, political, and social media, even the average citizen or naive layman can recognize that something just does not add up. We have reached a point where it is difficult to know what information you can trust and whom is telling the complete truth regarding all that is simultaneously occurring today. News media has blended with show business, and feeling informed seems now to equate to being entertained. Affect over substance, the abject over conscious. We are inundated with consistently confusing topics and paradoxical scenarios, systematic tragedy and provocative reporting, soap opera-like controversy after controversy. The stark information binary within left-right politics, the intense tribalism of social groups and ideologies, all the while, hypersexuality, drugs, and vice are supplied through the back door.
Do you like
convoluted and negatively charged information consecutively rolled out for a Borg-like population of serial consumers and pleasure seekers, with the general disposition of shallowness that you would find in a puddle and the collective attention span of an infant. It's no wonder why this onslaught of maligned information has transformed the demographic as it has, and in such a short period of time. Or has this been going on much longer than we might be aware of? Interestingly, as network and mainstream information has become less and less reliable, the voices and ideas of the general population have become less and less tolerated. Possibly this describes an emerging authoritarian censorship campaign carried out by a self-appointed expert class, dictating the flow of what is to be known and unknown, guiding the Overton window only as it complements the magnum opus, forging and willfully shaping the societal forces by hand. A manual, force-fed system of parental dominance, if you will. For the overall good of the nation, of course. Well, since apparently its people do not possess the competence to make societal decisions responsibly, we sit back and witness the establishing state take the reins. Is the modern man and woman systematically being rendered to a low-functioning bioproduct of this establishing state? A mere cog in its gears? Has it used information against its subjects to produce a predictable and preconceived social outcome? Let's look into it. The saying goes, if it isn't broken, don't fix it. One could posit that, on the contrary, if it is broken, it must be fixed. Then it would only make sense to ask the question, who will be the one doing the fixing? And what procedure, agreement, or set of parameters has granted them the role of fixer? Further, how is one supposed to know that these fixers are qualified to do the fixing? And what qualitative means are we addressing here? Quality of technology being considered? Quality of understanding and empathy behind the efforts of the said fixers? If we are going to consider the fixing of, let's say, the human experience on Earth, both of these qualifiers are of importance. Yet if we are talking about mitigating suffering as what needs to be fixed, then it would only make sense to consider the latter as the ultimate qualifier first. Yet today, as society openly presents it, the former is all that need be addressed for qualification. It is here where humanity faces its biggest problem, not in that which presents suffering on Earth, but the technological methods of obstinate focus and arbitrary qualified experts being appointed as the said fixers. For instance, technology corporations have single-handedly taken it upon themselves to transform the way human beings communicate and operate socially across the earth. In a matter of years, within hardly a decade, the entire socio-technological field of communication has been permanently altered. New neurological pathways have been formed, and old traditional forms of communication and social values have been destroyed. Now, of course, there are present arguments for positive and negative aspects of all of this change, but more importantly, should one not be concerned that they themselves, along with several billions of others that share the earth and its resources, had nothing whatsoever to do with the decision-making for this alteration? And within a decade, common human forms of culture, privacy, trust, authenticity, and identity have been thoroughly eradicated. Yet this result has been only considered progress because new, arguably narcissistic and antisocial forms of communication have been developed in exchange as a way to so-called perfect the human experience through the means of technology and technology only. Or has progress been used as a buzz phrase to propagate an overall subjective ambition of elite futurists, while selling their ambitious concepts to the masses in the form of fear, an objective human rights concern, and ultimate, inevitable goal? Here the argument could be that the environment and its care is being used as a global advertisement for technocratic totalitarianism, by way of the buzzword sustainability, for instance, since logically, sustainability equates to totalitarian rule. To sustain an entire planet within an equilibrium, a strict system of total dominance and control is required. And yet, another argument could be that the digital divide and finite nature of humanity is being used as a global advertisement for technocratic totalitarianism, by way of buzzwords like singularity, for example, since logically only the technocratic expert class can bring to fruition the merging of mankind and machine. And here we are, witnesses and targets of a sales pitch of an eternity, so-called. They say, let us fix the ills and woes of humanity with transhumanism, and let us fix the cons and lows of the environment with sustainability.
There is a race to build a functioning, workable city and to replicate that model all over the world.
So how do we get here with an entire industry racing to build smart cities from scratch?
Technology is the answer, but what is the question?
Good question, Carlo.
As if humankind collectively appointed these so-called experts as saviors of man and the natural world. As if their diabolical plan is the only option available. As if these experts truly have the best interests of humanity at heart. Does the futurist of materialism believe in the essence of the heart? What foundation of morality do they possess to grant them such freedom to wield the technology that will direct humanity's future? Until these questions are answered, humanity is only agreeing to play a technological game of Russian roulette, boarding the freedom bus with blind trust, as a drunken blind man staggers behind the wheel. Godspeed, my friends. Godspeed. Speaking of the digital divide, which can be understood as information inequality, or the gap between those whom have access to computer technology and those who do not. Look at it as the technological equivalent to food in the pursuit of ending world hunger. Yet another ploy to corral the nations of the world with a giant digital lasso. By way of this war on the digital divide, companies like Google have self-appointed themselves Lord and Savior of the global digital domain. And as the salient kings of the earth, they plant their digital seed in every plot of land with ambitions to close the gap. all in the name of humanitarianism and human progress. One cannot help but fashion the image of a pygmy gripping that bottle in the film The Gods Must Be Crazy. But I digress. We will detail how this supposed humanitarian effort reveals itself to be nothing more than the legacy of scientism, fulfilling its great work, on track to godhood and technological perfection of man. How so, one might ask? Well, let us approach the fallacy of the war on the digital divide by assessing the digital connection, the global state's information and technology oligarch. Oh, one might say, but that sounds like some loony conspiracy theory talk, as if conspiring to meet private interest initiatives does not exist. Let us describe exactly how it does. The digital connection is the precursor to the technocracy, the corporate state of collective austerity, ran, controlled, monitored, and directed by big technology. When state power merges with the so-called technology private sector. Similar to how modern rap artists claim to be independent yet are owned, directed, and distributed via corporate industry giants. What are we getting at here? The digital divide has far less to do with bringing progress to humanity than it does constructing totalitarian rule over the human domain. By controlling the information that it processes, structuring a monopoly on epistemology, and a stronghold on human thought. Google, for instance, clearly the tech arm of the state and moreover, state intelligence. It is public knowledge that Google is not some private and balanced tech company of the people when it's controlled by In-Q-Tel, the venture capital group of the Central Intelligence Agency, along with many other companies and ventures that create a massive web of technocratic dominance. Let's look at the simple power and autonomy of a mere technology company like Google. It is able to freely do as it wishes with the planet, free of regulations, free of limits, and goes unquestioned while parading its global resource dominance. How is a private tech company given such rights to an entire planet? It's just a technology company in a tiny little city in California. Well, it's far more than that. Google is the state, not a private tech company, en route to fashion the global state via fixing the problems of the world and humanity. Is it any surprise that Facebook is also one of the In-Q-Tel's biggest investments? Why is state intelligence so concerned with controlling information? And isn't it odd how the same groups that control information are also the same groups constructing the global digital grid to the earth? The unholy matrimony of software and hardware. Facebook is not only funded and monitored by state intelligence, it is also a partner of the Atlantic Council and takes direct orders from think tanks. Here we find the connection between big tech and social engineering steering organizations, further providing evidence for our claims. Let us not forget In-Q-Tel not only funds the information sphere, it also is heavily invested in the military-industrial complex, by the way of DARPA, for instance, which ties everything to transhumanism and the so-called perfection of man through futurists' wet dream of singularity. Oh, but that's conspiracy theory. You can't just lump it all together and say they want to turn humanity into programmable machines. Well, who do you think is the leading funder and coordinator of atheist futurist Kurzweil's institution, Singularity University? None other than Google. Yes, Google, transforming the world one digital step at a time via its Global Dominance Initiative. Selling us the idea of singularity by touting they are saving the world, which actually translates into controlling the world and producing a coerced, technocratic, post-human existence. Let us not leave the false presupposition of sustainability off the table, which in fact translates to enforced austerity and corporate hegemony. Not world peace, by the way. Similar to how ideas of socialism translate to communist dictatorships, not sustainable social equality. Let us look at the Google subsidiary Collective Futures Summit, the TED Talks of sustainability, propagandizing collectivism for a new global order, addressing and fixing humanity's greatest challenges. Make it fun, make it colorful, make it undeniable by appealing to the emotive centers of the human heart. We can assess the fact that cities and nations all over the earth are currently holding these summits, preparing all minds, all cultures and worldviews for the big shift, the big directional progression of mankind, the hope and change humanity has been waiting for, and like God finally revealed. How do they plan to fully contain the biodomain via singularity? By promoting it in every institutional sector of mass influence. We find its presence within the Ivy League university system, for instance, along with the public sector university system. The Ivy League Sustainability Project is a perfect example of this. Here they inject the futurist culture into education, and more importantly, the younger generations. This is the epistemology wing. And of course, we find it all throughout anything Google is involved in. Here we see the big tech Silicon Valley playing its role in the mission. This is the technology wing. Then we find it throughout global government initiatives. We find examples of this via the work of NGOs, or non-governmental organizations, like UNICEF and UNESCO's Biosphere Project, which are all arms of the United Nations. Big government, the premier global think tank of our time, amongst others, of course. Here we find the management wing. Then we must look to secret intelligence, which seems to be funding and coordinating many aspects of every wing. The biggest sore thumb here is the Central Intelligence Agency venture capital firm In-Q-Tel, a leader in big data. Here we find the mass surveillance wing. And lastly, we get to the big money. Beyond In-Q-Tel, you will find direct funding of singularity and sustainability via the IMF, City of London, and of course, Wall Street. This is the finance wing. Not to say there are not more angles to this multi-headed dragon, but these are some key regions we can look to for a clear representation of the technocratic containment campaign of the global domain. So what's wrong with all of this? If they have the means to bring change to the world, why stop them? Why even be concerned? Well, this idea presumes humanity is a monolith, a hive mind that consents to a global oligarchy to begin with. It also presumes big futurist technology is the only answer or possible remedy for the ills and woes of humanity. Not only is this a logical fallacy of false alternatives, but it is an ethical pursuit that aims to handle the idea of suffering, being pursued by an oligarch that does not possess a moral standard to appeal to anything ethical. Cold scientists of the materialist worldview see human beings as programmable biological machines. The cybernetic studies of the Macy conferences are a good start for an understanding of this, where humans are mere products of randomness, without essence, without intrinsic meaning. How would they possibly lead an ethical pursuit when they do not hold an ethical model to work from? Do we not see the logical inconsistencies in the sales pitch? Instead of addressing the needs of humanity through understanding the essence of humanity, which is God, morality, and virtue, they overcompensate for their void of human essence by equating human beings to interchangeable objects, tools to be transformed and redesigned, lifeless organisms of habit, and they labor day and night to convince the earth of the same worldview, therefore fashioning mass capitulation and a faithful acquiescence fit to bring their great work to fruition. Not only an atheistic worldview, but a Platonic worldview of a ruling expert class that is the only class fit to rule over and dominate a global peasant citizenry. This is not only the mind of the technocracy, but the makeup of its social system. As if the fixers of humanity will save the world and bring salvation to humankind. How can those that only know death bring life? Let's address this idea of corporate authoritarian censorship. And first, and as we stated in part 1 of this series, the corporate state or private sector is the government state, and they are not independent of each other. Whether it be funding and investment, product and content, or value system and acquired goal, they are connected at the hip. And not surprisingly, network media has doggedly attempted to convince the public of otherwise, which seems to be the modus operandi of network media in general, to convince the public of things other than what is actually true. Hence the rash of recent and abrupt, conspired censorship efforts by the most influential and lucrative private sector media and information companies. Most notably Facebook, but for this installment we will cover the censorship contributions of Twitter, followed by many others of course. Of most importance is the fact that this is becoming a global trend. To emphasize and provide evidence for the global scale of this authoritarian censorship, we can look at WhatsApp for instance, which is a Facebook subsidiary and global giant, also practicing the curtailment and censorship of information amongst its mass of users. In India, fake news psyops are conjuring mass bans and information curtailment as well. Also in Brazil, where more than 100,000 accounts were banned for alleged fake news. It appears the newspeak term fake news has been the new conspiracy theorist strawman to silence dissent. For example, we could reference the recent executed takedown of free speech proponent social media source Gab, or the strategic multi-platform takedown of the infamous Alex Jones. As they claim vehemently that they are determined to thwart false information, yet the polar opposite appears to be the case. In actuality, they aim to thwart the organic persistence of truth and reason by convoluting it with half-truths and false information, or outright banning it altogether. It all presents itself as the same tried and true problem-reaction solution. They create the problems via propaganda media. The reactionary masses take to their sides whilst producing partisan and tribe-specific content in the form of memes, hashtag movements, and social media presence. Followed up by what appears to be their solution, austerity, and ultimately, global state-enforced perception management, the revealed ministry of truth. Therefore, we are noticing all the rhetorical mind games and newspeak terminology infest politics, network news, and entertainment media. Red herrings are being utilized to censor all original and opposing ideologies that pose as threats to the world's state cultural groupthink, also termed hegemony. The standout red herring terms you will consistently find in print and reporting are things like fake news and its alleged election tampering, wacko conspiracy theories, and recently the new hot topic and red button concept, memes. In fact, the EU is currently considering a type of ban on the usage of memes altogether, as they also pose a threat to psychological safety and the integrity of the population. Banning the use of memes? Moreover, banning and dictating the public's use of information based in arbitrary parameters, making certain forms of individual creativity and free speech illegal. Yes, indeed, and do not fall for the, oh, well, these are all private companies with their own guidelines in which you must follow, giving them the legal right to deplatform whomever they wish. free speech is a governmental right that is not to be considered when addressing private sector matters. Indeed, it's an easy way out and provides perfect plausible deniability. Well, as we have mentioned and proven before, the whole government and private corporation dichotomy is a lie. Private for-profit corporations with governmental privileges. Right. Conflict of interest much? Though on paper they can make the justified distinction between the two, those of us that are in the know very well, in practice and in spirit, they are one and the same. But let's continue. So in October, Twitter decides to cut a swath through the social media field in attempts to mitigate an alleged crime against humanity, or better, a dehumanizing movement of meme creators promoting the illustrious NPC meme, or non-player character, video game reference, which conservative users employ as a joke and criticizing measure to ridicule the current PC groupthink nature of the neoliberal political left. Yet but a precursor to many new forms of censorship to come. Similar to how Russian bots were used as red herrings to cover up the obvious scripting of federal political elections. These are representations of perfect public diversion tactics used as stumbling blocks in the road to truth. By using these diversions like Russian bots, Russian collusion, CNN versus Fox, and divisive factions like the Proud Boys and Antifa, you will find ripe and fertile grounds for the curation of a false political reality, manufacturing a subjective and saturated soup of domestic and international theatrics that the masses partake in dining, whereby social media affords us the means to all play our personalized avatars within a vast digital community controlled by fictitious experts, culture icons, and political leaders. A true simulation of sorts, a Sims society. So Twitter and the adjoined corporate Ministry of Truth perceive that humans are far too stupid to reasonably form their own perspectives. So stupid, in fact, that they must safeguard humanity from harmful disinformation that can involuntarily alter their perception of the world around them. Hence the avid pursuit in banning outspoken citizens online, forging a war on hate speech, so-called fake news, and dehumanizing meme content. When taking logic, ethics, and reason into account, all of this contrived activity clearly has nothing to do with a deep-rooted respect, moral responsibility, or empathic concern for humanity. Yet it has all to do with the expert class's innate arrogance and draconian methodology of global dominance, and essentially its utter disdain and disgust for the lowly and incompetent nature of humankind. Hence their parental-like guidance in everything we do, see, and even think. So what we find is the Ministry of Truth and Establishing State utilizing the development of meme culture as a divisive weapon to further build the polar extremes of left and right, stoking the flame of banter, increasing the level of bickering, and further dividing an already entrenched dialectic of ideologies. They have at the same time used the NPC meme to virtue signal a type of moral cyber meme, an ethical standard for which all internet users must adhere to. As if the dehumanizing nature of the NPC meme had crossed some sort of virtual line of ethics. Yet the neoliberal left and its mass media platforms religiously peddle smut to all ages for profit. They promote and advertise psychologically harmful material via the porn industry and music entertainment, Hollywood decadence and depraved reality television programming, and innumerable subcultures of drugs, death, and violence that have become commonplace in America. And with all that being said, the same neoliberal entities seem to be making this ethical distinction regarding what is to be considered dehumanizing or not. But we know at a worldview level, The leftist does not believe in an ethical standard to begin with. Moral absolutes are inherently antithetical to the neoliberal. Here we find but another inconsistency in the everlasting, inconsistent operating system of the postmodern technocratic state, where 2 + 2 = 5, because, well, they said so. As the alt-right and conservative right sadistically jump for joy over their self-serving wit and clever meme artistry that in many ways completely exposes some deep truths about the mental state of many leftist proponents, the neoliberals and leftists grow in anger and despair over their public humiliation. But what does this get anyone, other than a deeper-seated position beneath the thumb of the technocrats, who, after all, get the last laugh as they tower over both sides, adjusting their strings? The right side is plagued by an arrogant hubris and bloodlust for liberal tears, while the left suffers from stage 4 cognitive dissonance, false humility, and pathological victimhood. Proliferating the proxy culture war between grown children, increasing the public participation and preoccupation with all things political, building up and reinforcing the machine, the instigating bully riling everyone up to fight against each other. What we find with the NPC censorship via Twitter, or the social media vows against hate speech and dehumanizing content, are all mere incremental stages of mass information and speech censorship. The Fabian tactic of slow and steady incremental change via culture. Today's social media and memes are the vehicles of culture. So they begin by demonizing certain memes, units of language, and forms of speech. Next, they will demonize specific perspectives or ideologies, like the Christian worldview, for instance, by appealing to emotion and inclusive ideals, forcing the public by way of guilt to acquiesce and support the idea and action of silencing all ideas and utterances collectively deemed inhumane or harmful. From ideologies, they will move to all-out physical groups of people and communities, as well as all free speech advocating movements, all to be brought down and removed completely from public sight. Right now, we are witnessing only the very beginnings of postmodern technocratic fascism. Corporate technology, corporate funding, and governmental control. Technocracy, the brain, bread, and brawn of the 21st century dystopian paradise and Darwinian nightmare. So what is the whole NPC meme thing possibly demonstrating on an esoteric level? Because if anyone is paying attention, the gun-ho and gun-toting and foolhardy right is in many cases just as hive-minded as the overzealous and of low emotional intelligence left. Maybe we should look at it this way. NPC culture, non-playing, non-participatory, or non-thinking meme describes the overall socialization of society. In other words, the evolutionary result of transhumanist stratagem of morphing mankind into a subdued hybrid biomachine. Interestingly, the non-player character persona is a meme that demonstrates the transformation of the free human into an intellectually subjugated program, with scripted thought patterns imprinted via socialization within the World Wide Web, the social media sphere, and now the memeplex. And these have now become the new environments of inhabitants for mankind. The virtual world has superseded the physical one, and the controllers of the virtual environment dictate and manage the climate, which is basically saying they control what we see and believe to be true and untrue. Therefore, rendering mankind no longer the guide of its own personal knowledge and perspective, but parasitical attributes of a machine in which it gains all understanding. Here we find that no, humans in fact are becoming the AI. The human slowly becoming a programmed machine with artificial intelligence. Since the natural use and acquisition of knowledge is being replaced by automation and non-stop social media data intake, bypassing the former walls of logic and reason and feeding programmable info directly into the emotive and instant gratification centers of the brain, creating gratification loops and programmed heuristics that become the entire composite of one's life, being, and purpose as a human. Here we find the startling law of reversal in action while they humanize machines by attempting to produce robots that can reason and achieve consciousness like humans do. They mechanize humankind to take on the properties of the machine, an android foregoing its nature of critical thought, understanding, and introspection, no longer a creation in the image of God, but a creation in the image of machinery. Humans as energy resources are themselves becoming technology, but not in an inanimate sense, but a human one, a type of conscious technology, manipulated and steered from remote control. This remote control is mass media, no longer autonomous sovereign beings of nature, now Autobots confined to the specifics of their respective software. Designed, managed, and produced by the established media technocracy. You aren't liberated free thinkers, silly rabbits. You are running rodents, screwing like them, chewing like them, hunted like them. Not liberated free thinkers, but restricted thinkers, confined to their ideologue software, placed snug within the finite capacity of their hard drives. It's no wonder so many have fallen to the NPC dark joke. And there is a much deeper meaning to this entire idea of dehumanization. Possibly it is saying humans have become less than human. And there's much evidence to suspect this is true. Both sides take their jabs and shape their jokes, but the joke is on them all. Cognitive dissonance, blind zeal, childlike entitlement, or Herculean arrogance, simple representations of the inescapable fallen state of man. They all create perfect lackeys. While Elon Musk entices society's imagination with fantasies of Mars and flying cars, suggesting humans should worry about the dangers and concerns of technology, especially AI, and its impact on the Earth, beneath all the wool and possibilities, could it be that they themselves are systematically being morphed into human AI technology?